Welcome to AI Applied. We have two very special guests, which we've been looking forward to forever. Jaden and I had been trying to book these guys for so long. Finally, we managed to sort of get on their calendar. One of them is our old friend, Brian Solis, who's head of global innovation at Service. Now we've had Brian on before. He's one of the best thinkers in this. And somehow we managed to secure Dave Wright, the famous Dave Wright, who's chief innovation officer over at Service now as well. And Brian, you and I were sort of talking offline, and the reason, as you know, Jaden and I really wanted to have you on. You were kind enough to wrangle Dave as well, as that you guys have a new book. And as our audience knows, like, this isn't, we don't usually sort of like come and be like, hey, tell us about your new book, but these guys are such amazing thinkers on this. So you can sort of see Brian toggling or trotting the book
Brian,
across.
we gotta you have to hold it for the whole podcast. Actually, we need to see this
instead of Brian's face. The book, but it's called. It's a great title. It's called Infinite: How Visionary Leaders Transform Today's Business into AI Forward Companies. Jaden and I talk about this stuff all the time, and to have two folks here who really understand this world unbelievably well and have gone deep enough to write a book on it. Is just it's a joy to have you guys on. So thank you. So first, just thank you guys for making the time.
No, thank you for having us.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Thank you for making the time. And not from an airplane somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, yeah.
Well, Brian, you are one of our most frequented guests. I mean, I don't know if this is your second or third time on the show, but we appreciate getting your insights every time. You guys are amazing. Thanks so much for coming on. But I'd love to kick a first question off to Dave, and just like hearing a little bit about your background. I know that you're a tech practitioner. You've been doing this for a very long time. You see the actual execution. What is a concrete example of a workflow or a daily task that regular employees do today that is going to look completely unrecognizable, maybe in 2 years, because of AI? Like, what are we seeing in the future, and like, what are the things that we're going to see shifting?
So if you think about anything that you might do on a daily basis, let's say you're a manager and you're hiring new employees, or let's say you're a customer and you're looking to get service for something that's gone wrong from a device perspective. Let's say you're head of procurement in a company and you're looking from a commercial development and an M&A acquisition process. What we think is starting to happen now is you're seeing more and more of these processes getting digitized, and the workflows becoming digitized, and the capability to be able to then automate those workflows and streamline those workflows. So you imagine that example, you were talking 2 years out. What could it look like in 2 or 3 years out? You imagine being able to go to a chatbot that's modeling your company, that's got a lot of those workflows already embedded in the company, and talking to it about an acquisition target and being able to run different scenarios around what would that look like for your company? What were the probabilities of success? Whereabouts were the possible hotspots? And it could be doing anything at that point. It could be looking at your data. It could be going out to Glassdoor and looking at cultural fits. It could be pulling data in from LinkedIn to understand what employee sentiment was. You could start to look at what potential total addressable market you'd have as a combined company. It could completely change the way that you modeled and thought about things. So this whole concept of not just digitizing existing workflows, which, okay, so that's 100% what people are doing now. They're just putting AI on top of existing workflows and then going, wow, we're not getting any return on investments. Well, yeah, you're not. So the idea is try and use, and this is the whole point of the Infinite book, the idea is try and use AI to do something you couldn't do before, not use AI to do something you could do before, but do it faster. That's just not a road to anything from a value perspective.
Yeah, I love that. And Brian, I want to sort of like pass over to you and to Dave for both of you guys, but that feels like everything. It feels like, when you think about what Service now does really well and why you all wanted to do this book in particular, and the reading that I've done about this book is one of the reasons we wanted to have you guys. I'm like, this is exactly right. It's where Dave just left off, which is, it doesn't feel like it's the faster horse anymore, right? It feels like, how are we going to reinvent what this looks like? But when you guys think about what you wanted, like the messaging in this book, Infinite, how did you sort of think about getting that to an audience? Brian, I know you've done a ton of books like this. How did you sort of like, what was the messaging that you felt like would resonate that wasn't out there already. And Dave would love to hear that from you too.
I'll kick it off because I remember exactly when the idea for the book came together between Dave and me, and it was this acknowledgement that, as Dave said, every conversation was about automating what was just digitized, sort of the fruits of digital transformation over the last 15 years, and that at the same time we were observing the cultures that were emerging out of AI native companies in Silicon Valley, the things that they were measuring, the way that they were shifting org charts into work charts. And we recognized that we weren't going to be able to help companies transform one workflow at a time if the workflows themselves weren't transforming. So we wanted to demonstrate what would be on the other side. As Bill McDermott famously says, AI business reinvention. We wanted to show what that looks like. What does AI business reinvention mean, and what does it look like? What are the steps that it takes? What does the company on the other side look like? And to do that took a great not just amount of thinking, but a great amount of humility to be able to recognize that in order to write that book, we would have to actually come up with those answers and do the work and do the research and do the thinking, so that we weren't just passing off the hard work to the reader. Instead, well, still hard work to transform your company, but instead we were giving them a blueprint for what to do. And that made it not a book about AI, which would probably be irrelevant by the time it was published, but instead a book about business transformation with AI.
That's one of the interesting things is the great thing about this from a conversational perspective is it allows me to go in and have a conversation with a customer and start off by saying, what is your AI strategy? Because we fundamentally think that your AI strategy should not be about AI. Your strategy should be doing something with your business. And AI should be a tool that enables you to do that. So quite often you can have a conversation and it'll go into a completely different area. You'll say, what do you want to do as a business that you couldn't do before? And it might be like, oh, we wanted to move into the Chinese market, or we wanted to move out of manufacturing product X to product Y, but we couldn't do it because we didn't have the resources. And then you back AI into that conversation and say, well, how could we use AI to free up the resources or free up the cash or free up the human capital to give you enough air gap to be able to do what you want to do to transform your business? And that's the essence of the book, that when you think about where your company needs to go next, you're normally constrained by a lack of resources. So how can we teach people to free up the resources so they can infinitely move the company on and on to the next thing? I don't think it doesn't mean infinite as in how can you continually grow your company. It's how can you continually evolve your company.
I love that. And I think that distinction between growing and evolving is an important one. But I also think for both of you, probably a question I would love to hear answered is, you both work at ServiceNow, so you see a lot of the inner workings of all of the, the thousands of major global businesses, right? A lot of them. What is maybe one of the biggest misconceptions that you guys are seeing every day, maybe from bosses that, right now they're trying to bring AI into their offices? What are people getting wrong in that?
I don't mind starting with that one. So I think the big problem, well, you see it all the time. The big problem is the way people measure what they're doing with AI. So you'll see this message always coming down from the top in all these companies. Hey, we want to be seen as being maybe not AI native. We want to be seen as being AI first. So we're going to use AI for everything we can possibly do. And we're going to measure how often people use AI. And that's going to mean we're doing a good job, as opposed to measuring what the outputs are. So if you want like a solid example of this, we saw it in the engineering world, where originally everyone would come through and say, oh, now, we're generating 10 million lines of code a year using AI. And you're like, well, is it good code? It doesn't matter. It's just code that AI generates. And that's what matters.
Enough out of you.
Who cares if it's good? And it's kind of like, it's like when you'll get people saying, oh, we've used this AI chatbot technology and we're deflecting 95% of our calls. And you're like, cool. So what's your reopen rate, or what's your customer satisfaction rate? Doesn't matter. We're deflecting 95% of our calls. So So for me, the biggest mistake people make is assuming that usage of AI is actually providing any benefit. You have to measure the outcome, not just the fact that you're using the tool.
I can add nothing to that. That was, but I will add a human thing and the human element, which is Dave and I have talked about at length. How do we help people come to the conclusion that their approach up to that moment isn't necessarily going to yield the type of results that are possible? We've had some very honest conversations, for example, where we've been on the other side of a table with someone who has the most expensive watch in the world and a few years from riding off into the sunset. And, we have to really honestly ask ourselves, is this the person that's going to control alt delete and take this big leap? And the answer is probably no. They're probably going to do the best they can with the resources that they have and set off into the sunset with its best legacy as possible. But when we see, for example, the two CEOs of Coca-Cola and Walmart say as they're stepping down that they're not the right leader to see AI transformation through. We know that they probably didn't come to that realization on their own. They're probably feeling it through the pressure of their inner circle, the market, what have you. And so it is this realization where, to kind of come back to an earlier conversation we had, where that mind shift needs to happen, where they recognize maybe I'm actually part of the problem. And the questions that I'm asking or the goals that I'm trying to achieve set me up for, like what Dave said, we're just trying to get to a deflection rate without really thinking through what's on the other side. Why are we deflecting in the first place? What's the root cause? Maybe we need to ask some deeper questions with AI so that we can uncover new solutions and also, more importantly, more possibilities.
Yeah, I really like that because it gets to this question about culture. I love that you brought up Walmart and Coca-Cola, which both have, unbelievably successful companies, both, Fortune whatever companies. And it makes me think about something in that you've talked about a lot, Brian, and would love to hear from both of you on this too, about like culture and the role of culture in this. Because first of all, Dave, I just totally agree with what you're saying there. I can't tell you how many times, like when we work with big organizations, like how many times we just say, like, forget AI for a second. Like, right. Like what drives value? Like what is that thing? When we think about ROI, we often think like ROI is often just like the ROI on the salary of one of your employees. Like a salary is an ROI bet every day. Like, can you have those people performing at a higher level? But how do you measure that, which is huge? And what you were just saying, I'd be kind of curious on this. I don't want to put you on the spot. Like, do you agree about the heads of Coke and Walmart and places like that? But more, where is the role of culture on this? Because there's really two ways of seeing AI, and they're sort of both right. One is that it's sort of like the mandate has to start at the top. We know the process has to be done sort of by the people below. We know that, all that kind of stuff. And culture is sort of the thing that runs all of this. And I totally agree. But, a lot of these companies, especially the ones that service now, services, are the biggest companies in the world, and what you're coming in to, I assume, augment good cultures already. So when you're talking about culture, how, from a ServiceNow standpoint, do you even think about that, and how does that fit into AI, and specifically, how does that fit into this idea that this kind of infinite operating system that you guys were talking about? And Brian, would love to hear from you first, and then Dave on that.
We believe in the mantra of putting AI to work for people, and what that means is, if you take a step back and you look historically how we thought about technology, every technology revolution, especially through the last digital transformation years, technology itself has gained the reputation and now the construct of being a cost center. So this is why you see so many conversations about deflection, automation. You don't ever hear from a customer of a company like Coca-Cola or Walmart that says, gosh, I hope I get to talk to a chat bot today, or I hope my call is deflected today.
Fingers crossed. Maybe today's the day. Yeah.
And in fact, customers feel a great deal of anxiety if they need service. And ironically, service is the most emotional moment in a customer's journey. They need help, and it is an opportunity for company to address that emotion. And when you look at the research, because it's an emotional moment, how that situation is handled is going to trigger one of two memories: a great memory or a horrible memory. And memories are the things that actually tie back to a brand association, recall. If it doesn't generate a memory, then it's just forgettable, and that also sucks. So in 2 of 3 scenarios, you lose. Yet senior leadership is still not looking at AI as an opportunity, like, how do we increase that customer experience? How do we increase that value? Because on the other side of that equation, math shows that a customer is likely to spend 25% more for a product if they believe they're going to have a great experience. So that's just one conversation to have around value creation, where ironically, we're thinking about how to take that experience away from you with AI versus how could we use it to generate a better experience for you, something more personalized, something more preventable or proactive, predictive even. So in those scenarios, you start to trigger ROI opportunities that aren't even on the books yet, because all we had was cost deflection. And in a cost deflection scenario, you're not putting AI to work for people. You're probably looking at paying for AI by taking people out of the equation. And that math is finite, and that is part of the construct for an infinite company. But we'll come to culture a bit later, because I know Dave has a lot to add here, but I do want to circle back to the people part of culture.
I mean, the culture side for me, or the people who I see getting it right, and I take a lot of this from. I know we've done conversations before, Connor, where we've talked a lot about how you pick up things from kids and how you look at how your kids use AI, and that's a different way of thinking about things. But culture for me has to come down from the top. So it has to be, first of all, it has to be honest with the company. So you have to go out and say, hey, we're using AI, and this is what we want to achieve with it. And unfortunately, for some companies, it will be bottom line reduction. And they'll say, well, we just need to be more effective. We are going to get rid of people. We haven't necessarily got an infinite mindset. We've got a problem that we need to solve. But the people who come in and say, we're not using AI as a replacement, we're using it more as an augmentation to either allow you to do something you couldn't do before, or to free you up to do something else that we want you to do. As long as you've got that kind of transparency, that's a great start. But then the next thing you need after that, I think, and this is the one thing I think that we miss, is you need to create a culture of trust where people have that trust safety net, where if you go into a company that's really thinking future forward, everyone isn't panicking about losing the jobs. Everyone's thinking about what they're going to do next, and what are they going to be allowed to do that they couldn't do before. But you have to allow people to question AI. That's one of the biggest things I've noticed with my kids is you'll look to use AI for something, and they'll actually say that is not a good use case for AI. There is a better way to do it.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Don't jump towards AI to get everything done.
And you're like, do you know who I am? I run.
Yeah. Look at my book. We have to use it.
Exactly.
But that's the way it should be. People should, if people are putting an AI solution in place, and the whole company is thinking, this kind of sucks, but it's like Emperor's New Clothes. I don't want to say this isn't any good. That's a real bad culture to be in. You want to be able to question things and say, actually, there is a better way we could do this. And if you can create that feeling of trust within the culture of the company, that makes it a lot healthier, in my opinion.
Okay, my question for you, Dave, because I saw you wrote about this a bit in the book, is kind of this concept of these small companies, these small AI native startups being able to compete with a lot of the multi-billion-dollar companies. Talk to us a little bit about why that is, what that looks like, but also from the perspective of, let's say you are in one of these multi-billion-dollar companies, how do you harness that same capability, that same power? Like, how do you bring that into your company? Because I think a lot of companies can view this as a threat, but there's kind of two sides to that coin if you do it correctly.
Right. right? So a lot of these new companies are producing phenomenal amounts of revenue per employee figures. You know, they're generating $3, $4, $5 million per employee, whereas a traditional company, you know, maybe you're doing like 400K, 500K. So so the difference between the companies in my mind is a lot of the time it's legacy. So these new, more nimble startups aren't really constrained by having to deal with a lot of customers they've had in the past. They're not constrained with having to maintain a system, but they're also not constrained by thinking in an old way. So almost all the workflows that run across an enterprise were designed around one premise, and that premise is we haven't got enough people. So, what they do is they design workflows that streamline work to make it as efficient as possible. That they force people to do things in the same way to make it as repeatable as possible, because that made it easier to onboard people. But now, when you're in one of these startup companies, you're not resource constrained. You haven't designed workflows because you've only got 5 people who can write code. Now you've got 5 people who are using AI to write code. You've got 50 coders. You've got 500 coders. You've designed your workflows around a constraint on resource, whereas these new companies are just operating on a principle of abundance, where they've got I'm not going to say an infinite amount of resource, but they've got considerable more resource than they had before. So they develop better ways to do things that aren't constrained in the past. Now, if you're a company that's looking to get into that frame of thinking, this is where, and we talk about it a lot in the book, this is the difference between an iterative mindset and an innovative mindset. Rather than just trying to do what you do before and asking the question, how can we do this? How can we do it more often? How can we apply AI to it? The question you want to be asking is why. Why do we do it this way? Do we do it this way because that's the way we've always done it? Or do we do it this way because that's the way I did it at Oracle 30 years ago? Is there a different way of thinking about things? And when you start to ask that why question, that opens up the aperture for what you can do so much wider than it was before.
It's so cool. And Brian, it kind of like leads into the next thing, which is, how do we start changing that? And you and I, and you've been on this podcast, at least a couple of times, I guess, to talk about this. And I've always been really fascinated by how you guide people into that change. Because as Dave is just sort of just pointing out here, it's like when you've been at Oracle 30 years and you've been successful and you get compensated well because you do things a certain way, it's very hard to change that. And I think, our sort of thesis of work to a certain extent when we're working with companies at our company is like, you can't mandate AI. People sort of have to lean in or lean out, because it's not like it's replacing an old thing. It's not like that typical digital transformation where it's like, okay, we used to do it with this product and now we do it with this product. It's a whole new way of thinking. And Brian, you've spent a lot of time and also have best-selling books on these ideas of how you change people's thinking. And so I guess a kind of a little thing for you on this is, what does that look like inside an organization like ServiceNow, where you're trying to do this at mega scale with all kinds of companies? And like, what have you learned from your other, work and books on this to sort of like think about how you change that way of thinking at scale?
Thanks for that, Connor. Dave and I wanted to use this book as sort of a moment to throw a rock in a still lake and create that concentric circle movement that we could use the book as this moment to start scaling these types of conversations in a way that, we can't be in every room. We can't be with every customer at once. We can't be in every conversation, but hopefully we can be there virtually through the ideas that we share in the book. And at some point before we run out of time, I want to make sure we talk about this concept of a chief workflow officer.
Yeah, please.
But the hardest part about this is what you just said. It's human. Most people don't come to the moment and recognize, like, I wonder what I'm not thinking about. They're supposed to know what to do. I did this really amazing series of workshops recently it was all day, these intimate workshops with CEOs and COOs, where we did the same workshop over the course of over the day, but every single workshop had the same things come up. And one of them was so interesting, which was it felt like we were in therapy. And CEOs repeated throughout the day, like, I can't tell people I don't know what to do.
Yes, right.
I get paid because I'm supposed to know what to do, and I don't know what to do. And so essentially, if you take the psychology of that, what they're saying is, I'm going to do what I know what to do, which is I'm going to take costs out. I'm going to make things more efficient. I'm going to promote AI fluency across the organization. I'm going to tell people to use AI more until you hit too many tokens, and then we're going to throttle back. But that's a conversation for another day. But all that's going to do is scale the past, scale legacy, and probably just put yourself in a position of competing to the bottom or racing to the bottom. The new AI becomes the new status quo in that equation. So it is a courageous moment for someone to recognize that they don't know what to do and then to do something about it. Like, first express it, and then surround yourself with people that, like Dave, could tell you, let's think differently. Let's ask some different questions. And so when Dave talked about the iterative and the innovative mindset, we have a paper on that, which actually made its way into the book, where we recognize, like, you can't just say that. You have to show them what the difference between the mindsets are. And then you can't just say that. You have to give them the list of questions that an iterative mindset might ask, like the better ones, and then the questions an innovative mindset might ask. Because what you're doing then is you're starting to make the unknown tangible for them so that they can do what they do really well, which is lead. And that is essentially giving them the tools and the blueprint to help them now start to gain the insights that hopefully inspire a vision that they wouldn't have had otherwise. That's human transformation made possible. And then from there, a leader can do what they want to do, which is take that vision, articulate that vision, articulate a future motivating state, and then how we're going to get there. And then that becomes the culture of transformation. So, I mean, it's incredibly simplified, but it is very human.
I love that. And I mean, you left me on a little bit of a cliffhanger. I know we got to wrap up here soon, but I got to ping this one over to Dave, which is, what are some of the questions that people and leaders should be asking themselves when they're trying to make these changes? Like, what should they be thinking about, and what kind of questions? And, you know, for the listener, like, we're giving, I want you to give them the gold nugget on, you know, a bit of a blueprint here.
So they should be thinking about what they want the end outcome to be from all this. So you start off by defining what your end vision is. What do you want to create, and thinking about how you can use AI to do that. Then you need to start asking questions around what your organizational structure should look like, because most organizations, especially if you look at like a middle management layer, most of that management layer is geared around orchestration. So if you start to automate that orchestration, do you alter your management ratios, or do you end up not leading the same pyramid type structure that you had? You have the capability to flatten out that pyramid quite a lot. So start to think about what you're doing from a management structure. Think about how you're going to measure the outcomes that if you want to achieve a certain thing, what are going to be the milestones that allow you to achieve that? Then you need to start to think about how you're going to manage this. Because to use Brian's example before, when people go out, especially if it is like a CEO or a COO that doesn't have the answers, but they know the board is pressuring them to deploy AI, you suddenly start deploying AI, and you look at the figures where the industry is now. You're getting to the point where the number of agents deployed is doubling every 18 months. The token spend is doubling every 5 months. If you're lucky, it's every 5 months. It could even be faster. So without putting guardrails in place to be able to measure the effectiveness of what you're doing and how much you're spending to do that, you could rapidly go off the rails and end up in something that was going to not just give you return on investment, but potentially damage the company. And then the last thing I'd say to think about, if I could put my believe motto on the wall, if I had the one thing that I was going to look at every day, it would be the simple question: am I automating the past, or am I inventing the future?
Yeah.
And if I can look at everything I'm doing and say, is this just making the past better, or is this actually moving the company and moving the business in a different direction? That one question alone will force me to ask some of the other questions to think about what I'm doing.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, Brian. I want to kind of give you the last word because you're the reigning champion of sort of like returning guests. So before I wrap, last thoughts. You did tease Chief Chief Transformation Officer. I want to make sure you get to that too.
Oh, Chief Workflow Officer.
Officer. Sorry.
There's a couple of things I want to leave us with, and I'll give Dave the last word on this because this was one of our. I loved writing this book so much because it led to some just incredibly enriching conversations. The kind of revisiting culture for a bit. So Dave and I launched with our team ServiceNow Futures, which we're really excited about. It's our forward-looking movement to help companies think bigger, dream bigger, see what's around corners. And we just published a report recently called AI Cultures and Agentic Darwinism. And we look at the 4 reigning cultures behind AI. And we specifically look at AI natives and call out what makes those companies amazing. You could just Google my name, ServiceNow, and AI Cultures, and you'll find the link. It's a free download, no email gate, because it continues the conversation in a really productive way. But one of the things that Dave and I were talking about as we were writing the book was we challenged ourselves to actually, pick a workflow and reinvent it with AI. And it was an incredible thinking exercise. And it led to a conversation like, so who's going to do that inside the company? Right. You have McKinsey's Quantum Black in their State of AI report, where they said of the 25 attributes they studied around ROI's impact on EBIT, reinventing workflows with AI at the core was the number one attribute. Yeah,
sure.
And so we thought, well, that should be someone's remit then, if it carries that kind of economic impact. And so we had come up with this concept that would be essentially not a chief AI officer. That would be like a chief workflow officer, someone who's responsible for taking all of these vertical workflows that are stuck in silos and thinking about how would we make that work go across the enterprise to really put AI to work for people. And so I'll turn it over to Dave, but that was a fascinating realization that it was one thing that a company was that could employ to really rethink this at scale.
It was weird that everyone comes to the same conclusion that this all comes down to data, to AI and workflows. And we had chief data officers, chief AI officers, but no one looking at workflows. And even when you do get someone who looks at the workflow, they only look at the workflow within their silo. So if you look at most things that happen in a company, it's going across multiple lines of business. There might be actions that finance need to take. There might be actions that IT needs to take. There might be actions that human resources need to take. But there's no one who looks at it holistically and says, is this workflow designed for the future? Is there a way we could not just optimize this, but perhaps rewrite it? Are people doing like process mining exercises where they're going across the workflow rather than just down through the silo? So when people start to look at things like this is where, as Brian said, you get to fundamentally improve the effectiveness of your company. This is what's driving EBIT or data. I don't know if I'd want the job. I mean, you'd have to. The one thing you'd have to do is you'd have to make sure whoever you gave the job to is completely empowered to do it, because you are going to be going in there and killing some sacred cows.
You're really selling this. You're really selling this, Dave. It's like nobody's going to want this, but yeah,
everyone needs it. It should pay well.
No, but this is. I mean, listen, we could talk to you all day. Thank you so much for this. I love that we ended on that, because I totally agree. I think that the concepts that came out of this are unbelievably innovative, and the way you articulate these are fantastic. And it's to hear how this is working at one of the biggest organizations in the world has been a real gift. The book is Infinite: How Visionary Leaders Transform Today's Business into AI-Forward Companies, and it's Dave Wright and our friend Brian Solis. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining. It's been such a pleasure to have you guys on.
No, it's been a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure.
All right. See you next time. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks.